Well, hey everybody, my name is Keith. I have some familiar faces in the room. It's great to see you guys again. And some first-time intros today. So one of the things actually that I'm going to kick off this session with is I want to acknowledge that today you guys are in Impact Hub Belgrade. Tomorrow, as a part of day 2, ICT Hub from Belgrade will be in the space. In today's session, I have already seen folks from Mostar, and I've seen folks from Sarajevo as well. And the reason that I'm highlighting that, so for example, Spark from Mostar, and then Mosaic and Networks from Sarajevo. And so the reason I'm sharing that is because this process that you guys are going through is a networked process, right? So how many people here are entrepreneurs? Awesome. And how many people want to be an entrepreneur? How many people are here for the food? I was kind of hoping you would all raise your hands, right? And so it's really important. How many people think that as an entrepreneur you're going to do it alone? How many of you think you will do your company alone without help? Exactly. I like that. She's like, you know, it's interesting, right? As a challenge, as much as you guys all did not raise your hands and you know that you will not do it alone, when it comes to like tomorrow and Wednesday and next week and next month, I guarantee you'll try and do it alone, right? And the reason is because there is this process that we go through where we say, you know what, I'm the only one who knows my company. I'm the only one who knows my customer, right? And so we kind of go through this interesting journey where we say to ourselves, somehow I got to be the guy to figure it out. And then it gets harder when you have a team, right? Because then you have employees or contractors working for you and they look to you and you're like, well, I guess I must have the answer, right? And so the reality is we don't. So part of the exercise that we're going to go through today is actually to talk about how you guys make sure that you don't try and do it alone. And the benefit that you have is over the next 2 days or day and a half, you guys will actually not only be able to practice it, but you'll actually be able to put it into good use going forward. So for example, I'm going to pick on somebody. Marco is here. Marco will raise his hand. Marco is with Spark, and Spark is in Mostar. And is anybody in the room doing anything with hardware? Anybody doing hardware, software? So we got one guy at the back and 2 more people. Okay, good. So as I recall, last year, Spark ran a drone race in Mostar, and they got the post office involved. And so interestingly enough, if you're working with hardware, they have a makerspace where people work with hardware. So now you know, for those who raise your hands, you know there's at least one person in the room that you can talk to about the opportunities and challenges of working with hardware. So I wanted to use this case study. Thank you, Marco. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of an exercise. So what we're going to do is everybody, this side of the room, look to your right, and then the person who's at the end of the row, you're going to have to kind of look back, I think. And then for you guys, you're going to look left. So look at the person beside you. Okay? So now here you have a task. You're going to do 2 things. You're going to introduce yourself, and then you're going to ask one question. And so you're going to ask, how can I help you? So don't ask for help, but introduce yourself and then say, how can I help you? So I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes. Okay, go. All right, everybody. Okay, we'll bring it back. I've got to say that you guys were like game on as soon as I said go. Wow, that was amazing. I think my ears are going to be ringing for a day after that. So I have a question for you. Did you meet somebody new? Did you meet someone new? No. Did you learn something new about that person? Right? How did it feel offering help? Because you offered help, said, how can I help you? How did that feel?
Easy.
It felt easy, right? So that's actually the whole reason why I wanted to do that exercise, right? Because when you speak to a mentor in the next 2 days, whether it's myself or Chris Werman or anybody else that's here, we feel the exact same way. When you ask for help, it's easy because we offer the help, right? So the whole purpose for you guys to remember as you go about this process as an entrepreneur is that when you ask for help, other entrepreneurs, mentors, advisors, investors, they want to help, right? And it's kind of easy, right? So I think it's really important. Now, I have another question for you guys. When you offered help, did the other person ask for something? Yes? No? Maybe? More chat? Yeah. So, how many people had someone ask them for help? Like, because you offered help, who asked? Right? So a couple. Could you help them with that ask? Could you actually help them? Good. How about you? Could you help?
Yes.
Yeah? How about you?
Yeah, definitely.
Could anybody not help? Does anybody not help? Oh, okay, so this is fantastic. Good for you guys. So it is important to note that sometimes when you ask someone else for help, they can't help, right? So maybe I ask you for an introduction, right? Or maybe I ask you to help me with something in marketing, right? And so it is important to note that when you ask for help, sometimes people can't help. But the important part is when you ask for help the first time, you're actually building a relationship, right? So I might not be able to help you today, but I might be able to help tomorrow or the next day or next month or next year. Does that make sense? So over the next 2 days, a show of hands, how many people would like to get help with marketing? Okay, great. How many people would like to get help with funding? I'm so shocked. I thought everybody would raise their hand on funding. How many people would like to get help on sales? Now we're talking. Yeah, there we go. How many people would like to get help on team? Yeah, not bad. So I want to highlight something to you. When we as entrepreneurs interact and when we talk to each other, the first thing that always comes up is sales. And then the second thing is funding. The third thing is marketing. The fourth thing, last thing is talent. So the reason that happens is because, sales is money, right? It's cash, revenue. That's so important to us. But one thing that I want to highlight to you guys is as you seek mentors and as you seek advice, you're actually looking to add to your team, right? And so the reason I say that is imagine team, like your core team is this circle, right? But then you have what we call an augmented team. And the augmented team is this larger circle around it. And that larger circle includes mentors, advisors, investors, partners. So I want to just highlight to you guys is when you seek help, you're actually, the first thing you're doing is not working on sales. And the first thing you're working on is not on funding. The first thing you're actually doing is you're adding to your team, right? So what I would love for you guys to do right now is you guys are now going to look the other way. And so in the next 5 minutes, what I would like you guys to do is share, if you were to meet someone between now and the end of the day tomorrow, what would you like to get from them? Sales, marketing, funding, and why? So what is it that you want to talk to them about and why? And the reason is because with the 30-ish people in the room, at the end of this session, you're going to go talk to people and you're going to go talk to people and so on and so on. And so if you know she's looking for something specific, then later on you might meet somebody and you'll be like, you know what? You need to meet her because she could use to talk to you. Does that make sense? Okay, so 5 minutes, go in the other direction. So what are you looking for and why? Okay? Good. All right, everybody! I loved watching some people walk around and move their chairs around. It's fantastic. And you guys are definitely getting into the rhythm of this, which I really like. So now I'm going to spend the next few minutes asking you guys a few questions. And then what I'd like to do is I'd like to then open it up for you guys to ask me questions and also ask Pavla as well, especially if you don't know Pavla. So, and if you know him, then you'll probably have some really good questions to ask him. Personal, maybe. So you guys have been going through this exercise now where you're actually adding to your augmented team. And so Pablo has written the 2 circles on the board. And where you're adding to your augmented team is peers, right? So fellow entrepreneurs, they could be at the exact same place that you're at, or maybe they're a few months ahead, or maybe they're a few months behind. And what I will tell you is that peers are actually the best mentors. And the reason that they're the best mentors is because they might just be 6 months ahead of you or 6 months behind you. And so you all know exactly what you're going through, right? Because sometimes, like for a guy like me, I have some experience, and this is the company that I run now is my 4th company, but I might not remember what it was like, say 2 months before launch or a year after launch. And so there's no substitute for having that time closeness. So now I'm going to ask a question. What do you think is the starting point of a mentor relationship? What is that first point? Trust. Yeah. Go ahead. Empathy. Empathy's great. Understanding. Yeah.
Maybe the mentor needs to be just a little bit ahead of us.
Yeah.
So that they can provide the
You can get something. Yeah. It's good. Experience. Yeah. So you guys have actually touched on, I think, a number of really important points. And so, Relationship. Yep, absolutely. So, I'm going to touch on a couple of things. Experience, relationship and connection, a little bit ahead of us, right? So we use those types of what I would call criteria to help us pick before we have that first conversation, right? But then when we start to get into things like empathy, and we get into things like relationships, and we get into things like trust, those come in time, right? Because when I first meet you, we don't know each other yet. So we need to build that trust and we need to build that empathy, right, over time. So my next question for you is, we're going to talk, hopefully, I'll be able to talk to many of you one-on-one today or tomorrow. So my question to you is, you meet me today or tomorrow, what do you do between now and Wednesday morning? What do you do?
You're on your LinkedIn.
LinkedIn?
Facebook, Twitter.
Yeah.
researching.
Research. What else? So you empathy. So what do? You say, thank you. Now you probably do that through LinkedIn, right? So why do we all love to help each other? Because it makes us feel good. So say thank you. True story. I've worked with more than 400 entrepreneurs in the city of Vancouver alone in the last 3 years. Any guesses how many of them said thank you? Less than 40. 10%. So my comment to you is, do you want to be in the 90% or do you want to be in the 10%? 10. So when you meet someone and you say, you know what, I think Keith might be able to help. So first, talk to them. Remember that they like to help. And then as soon as you finish talking, follow up. LinkedIn is fantastic for two reasons. One is it's a great way to know that you can connect with me. Then the second thing, to your point, is then you get to see all my connections. Any guesses how many connections I have in LinkedIn?
500 plus.
500 plus. But what's the plus? So 3,850. And I'm adding on average 6 a day. So, and then after a conference like this, hopefully a good 35, right? And so the important part is that once you meet me, then to your point, then you can say, well, who does Keith know? Right? And maybe I can extend this, right? So that's the starting point. After you connect and then you follow up, so the other key piece is when you follow up, like let's say I say to you, I know a guy who runs a company and I can make an introduction. Then you'll remind me to do that, right? So good. After you send that message, what do you think comes next?
Another message, another reminder.
Hopefully you don't need to remind me again, but you never know, right? Yeah, for sure. So totally fair. So the next step, so you meet someone for the first time, and in this world of building trust and empathy, but then also assessing value, is the advice that Keith gave me good? Was that introduction worthwhile, right? If the answers to those are yes, then you're going to ask me a new question, right? And when you ask me the second question, which can be by Skype or Zoom or in person or email, LinkedIn, whatever, then now we start to move into trust and empathy, right? Because when you ask me a second time, if I say I'm really busy, then you're like, well, maybe Keith does not want to have that relationship. But if you send me that question and I say, hey, great to hear from you again, right? Here's the answer to that question, or here's an introduction that I could make, or let's get on Skype, right? Now you're building the relationship and now you're building trust, right? So the important part is whenever you have a question in your business and you have a mentor or mentors around you, then always ask. It doesn't matter what the question is, because say today, at the end of this session, you have a new potential mentor, Keith. So that's one. And then the next session at 1:30 is a session being led by Chris Warman. And he's a fantastic guy, and you guys should see it. So then maybe at the end of that one, you have 2, and then you'll have 4, and then you'll have 6, and then you'll have 10, right? You'll have all these people wrapped around you. So every time you have a question in your business, ask all of us, because you don't necessarily know who will have the answer, right? So there's a company in Vancouver, and it's called Hootsuite. And Hootsuite is a company that is a software company that is a tool to make using the social networks easier, like to automate, and then also analytics, right? So how do I use, Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest and everything else for my marketing, and how do I get the data to make sure I'm doing the right things? That's what Hootsuite does. So at the last time I checked, Hootsuite is worth about $2 to $2.5 billion US. It's worth a lot of money, right? And so I was one of the first mentors to the CEO. And so at least 2 times a month, I would get an email from him. But it was a group email. And he would say, hey, everybody, I'm looking for this. Or I have this question. Can anybody help? And so one thing to remember, so who am I? Do you guys remember who I am? What do I do? What's my job title? CEO, 4-time, right? So what does that probably make me?
More experience.
Yes, aggressive, type A, driven, small ego, right? And so when you ask me that question, and I know you've emailed everybody else in the room, who do I want to answer it first? Me, right? So true story, 6 months after Hootsuite launched, the only social network This is in 2009. The only social network that they were connected to was Twitter. So Ryan Holmes, the CEO, sent out this email and he said, I'm going to be in San Francisco next week. Who can introduce me to Facebook? And I will tell you that the 12 people who got that email, I'll personally tell you, I spent 48 hours trying to create introductions for him. And at the end of 2 days, he had 6 introductions into Facebook. And that made him the first social media analytics company to actually have both Twitter and Facebook integration at the same time. That's how they became a $2.5 billion company. So remember when you're engaging with mentors that you're building a process. I meet you for the first time, right? Then you follow up. You say thank you. You build that rapport. You build that relationship. You create that empathy component to it. But then keep asking. And every time you ask, you build the relationship further. You build the trust further. And then you will have a winning relationship. Does that make sense? Awesome. Okay, so now what I'd love to do is I'd love to open it up to you guys for questions. So you guys are all entrepreneurs. So my comment to you is you can ask myself and or Pavla about mentors, about connections, about networking, or you can ask us any entrepreneur question you have. You can also ask me where I got this amazing t-shirt. So, questions?
Where'd you get the t-shirt?
I got it in Spain. I'm just kidding. I got it here. I got it here in December. Yeah. Good question. Other questions? It's your big chance. Go ahead.
So you said you work with startups, you said it.
I work with startups, yes.
Okay, so I think that, in my opinion, it's more important to build a successful startup or to be able to make it successful for a long time. Because today, startups are sellable, so people are making them so they can sell it. But for example, in my opinion, I would like to be able to work in my startup for a long time.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I will repeat the question for everyone. Do you build a startup to sell it, or do you build it to grow it? How many people, first-time entrepreneur? Okay. Second time or more? Okay, keep your hands up. For all you guys, how easy is this? Exactly. Yeah, you're like, no bloody way. I can see the look. So being an entrepreneur is very hard, but very rewarding. And what I find, and I've been an entrepreneur now for close to 20 years. My dad was an entrepreneur before me. If you're building something to sell it, that's the hardest thing to do day to day, because there's nothing to hang on to. Because you're not trying to, like, at the end of the day, there's a reason why you're doing your startup. And so I always like to call that changing the world, right? Like, you have a big grand vision for how you're going to change the world, and thus your startup, right? And so when the going gets tough, and it will get tough, right? Then if your whole goal is to sell your business for, say, $1 million in 3 years, that's actually not enough to keep you going. You've got to be doing it because you got to believe in what you're doing, and you want to build your business. Now, remember at the beginning of this session, we talked about not doing it alone. And so we have our co-founders, maybe, team, maybe investors, advisors, mentors. And so if you ask me to be an advisor to your business, the first question I'm going to ask you is, why are you doing it? And if you say to me, wow, it's like 50% margin, or you'd say, I'm going to sell this thing for $1 million in 3 years, I'll be like, good luck, because I know it's hard. And so if I go to hire you and I say, hey, Spring, join me now because I'm going to sell it in 18 months and I'm going to keep 90% of that. And you might get a little bit. You'd be like, why? Or I could say to you, I'm running Spring and we're going to change the world by helping entrepreneurs in every city. 200 cities is our goal. Are you on board? And you'll be like, 200 cities change the world? I might want to do that, right? So go with the why. You have to be in it long term. Now, if you're in it to win it long term, and you say, I'm going to be at it for a long time, and if you do a great job of it, well, somebody might come along with a check and say, I love what you're doing, I'll buy you now, then you get to choose. Okay? Great question. Other questions? Go ahead.
You said that you've been CEO for 4 times.
Yep.
Is it hard to change from one company to another to be, have they been the similar companies or the different ones, and how did you left the first company or the second or the third?
Yeah.
Was it your company or you were just
Yes, good question. Maybe I'll answer the second question first. How did I leave each company? So the first one we sold, and then the second one we actually split the company. And so one company got sold off, and then I went with the other one, which created the third company. And then that company I left. And the reason I left, so just so you guys know, is remember I said I spun it out of another one? So we spun out this company because we saw this cool problem to solve, and so we went to go solve it, but I didn't believe in it. And so 2 years later, we were the fastest growing ad network on the internet at the time, 2009, and I walked away from it. And the reason, just so you guys know, is I hated it every day because I didn't believe in it, right? And so, but it was that kind of byproduct of just spinning something out and solving a problem, which was a cool, like, brain challenge as opposed to anything else. And then the fourth one is Spring. So one thing that I will say to you, and the multi-time entrepreneurs can comment on this too, the easiest, quote unquote easiest, is to actually do another business in the same space. And then the next easiest thing is to do another business with the same business model. So maybe software as a service, or say retail bricks and mortar or whatever. But the reality is that every time you run a business, you actually learn what it takes to grow a business. And so what I have found is the best entrepreneurs, and they have done like multiple, they actually have jumped industries and business models, but they know what it takes to identify, like, what is the problem I'm solving? Is anybody gonna pay for it? I know how to build a great team so this thing can grow.